In this week's parasha, Parashat Shoftim, we have a couple of halachot that are specifically for a melech, a king over the Jewish people. And this is in Perek Yud Zayin, Pasuk Yudalid. The Pasuk starts off, Ki tavo el ha'aretz asher Adonai Elohecha notach. We're going to get to the land that Hashem is going to give us, the land of Israel. We're going to inherit it, we're going to settle it. And then we're going to say, Chazal, I'm not the happiest that we're going to say this, but we're going to say, let me place a king on top of me like all the other nations out there. We want to have a king. And now it goes through some halachot. That has to be a king that's from the Jewish people. Me'achecha, not an ish nochri, not a non-Jew. It has to be from the achicha. You have to have a Jewish one. And then it says, Rak lo yarbelo susim. It's okay for you to have a king, but make sure that he doesn't keep too many horses. Don't be marbeh. Don't go out of your way and get a lot of susim. Why? Velo yashiv et ha'am Mitzrayma lemar harbot sus. Because or you shouldn't go back to the land of Egypt to bring more horses. And Hashem does not want us going back to Egypt. And if we're going to get horses, they could lead us to want to go do more business. They're the best stallions are coming from Egypt. So we don't want that. Don't take a lot of horses because we don't want to go back to Egypt. And Hashem already told us, do not go back that way. Do not go to the land of Mitzrayim. Then it says, next pasuk, V'lo yarbelo nashim. And also, he should not take many wives. He shouldn't take too many women as wives. Why? Because we don't want, lest his heart go astray, that if he takes too many wives, his heart's going to go astray. And then finally, the second half of that pasuk, and he shouldn't amass a lot of silver and gold to excess. That's not going to be good for him. Okay, so three things. Don't take the horses. Don't have too many horses because it'll make you go back to Egypt. Don't take a lot of wives because it's going to make your heart go astray. And then don't amass too much gold and silver. And then it says, and he's going to sit on this royal throne. He's going to write down this Mishneh HaTorah and a sefer in front of the Kohanim, Levim, in front of, okay. And this Torah, this Mishneh Torah, is going to be with him. He's going to constantly read from this Torah, so he'll know to fear God, to keep the Torah and the Chukim, and this way, this way he won't become haughty towards to his fellows, to his brothers, and this way he won't be sor min mitzvah yamin usmol. He won't leave the Torah, and he'll have yarich yamim al malachto. He'll be a king for a long time if he keeps these laws. So he has to write this Mishneh Torah. Okay, now what is this Mishneh Torah that he has to write? Well, what does that mean, Mishneh Torah? So on the simple level, the king has a special obligation. Every Jew is supposed to write one Torah or pay for a Torah or inspire a Torah. Nowadays they say you can give donations towards books of Torah, but there is a simple halacha. Every Jew is supposed to write a sefer Torah, and now the Melech has to write one more. And I've saw some people bring down, okay, the Mishneh Torah is he has to have a special Torah because he's a king. Rashi gives two opinions. One is based on the Gemara. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Kafbet Amud Aleph. Over there it says a little different. It says, what is Mishneh Torah? He says it's Shtei Torot. Mishneh from the language of two. Shtaim. He has to have two, and he should have. How does he have two? He says he's going to have one that he's going to keep with him in his treasury in Beit Kenazav, and one Shiotzet B'Nichasayim. Well, that's going to go with him. And they say that second one has to be very small. He'll wear it kind of like an amulet, and he'll have to take this Torah with him everywhere he goes. So he'll have two. One back in the royal treasury, back in his home, and one that will go with him, so he's never going to forget the Torah. That's the first interpretation from the Gemara, and that Rashi brings down. Second interpretation, Rashi learns from Unklus. He learns that Mishneh is from the language of Shinun, which means to repeat, Meshaneh, to repeat and to utter, that he has to keep uttering these things. He has to keep repeating these things to himself. So not specifically that he has to write a second Torah, but he has to keep repeating. And Mishneh is language of Shinun. Keep repeating to yourself these halachot over and over again, so you don't forget the Torah and you don't become too haughty. Fine. The Kli Yakar says, what is the Mishneh Torah? What is he writing down? It's these pisukim right now. He says these three things that he's not supposed to do, to not take the silver and the gold, and not have many wives, not take the horses. This is what he should be reading to himself. Write it down and then read it to yourself over and over. So this way you won't forget these halachot, because we're going to see in a second that a big king, a very important king, is going to mess up when it comes to this. You have to remind yourself of these things. I saw one more opinion. I saw brought down that it refers to the 10 Commandments, that because the 613 commandments are in there, so he should write for himself the Mishneh Torah, which means the 10 Commandments somehow. Okay, and then the last opinion, which we'll get back to, is the Gra. The Gra brings down in Ideret Eliyahu that what does it mean Mishneh Torah? We know Mishneh Torah is also another word for another key symbol for Sefer Devarim, that the king has to write down Sefer Devarim. Sefer Devarim has a lot of musar in it. We know the king in the year of Hakel reads from Sefer Devarim. So over here it's saying that he has to write down Sefer Devarim. So he should have it, so he should read it, give that musar in him so that he won't mess up. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. So he asked about this Mishnah Torah not to mess up. The beginning is, what should you not mess up with? Don't mess up with taking these horses, taking these extra wives. Says the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Kaf Aleph Amud Bet. Says the Gemara. V'amar Rabbi Yitzchak, says Rabbi Yitzchak, Mipnei ma lo nitgalu tamei Torah. Why did the Torah not always tell us all the rationales, all the tamei mitzvot? Why not tell us why we have to keep every single mitzvah? Why did the Torah hide those things? Why? Says the Gemara, Sharei shtei mikraot, because there are two pesukim. We have our three laws we mentioned are brought down in two pesukim. We have two pesukim in our parasha. Nidgalu ta'aman. The reason was given. Why? Nikashel ben gadol haolam, and a great one messed up because of this. We saw the reasons behind why, and there was this great person who messed up big time. Who's that person? We're going to see in a second. Is Shlomo HaMelech. King Solomon messed up big time, and the reason why is because he knew the reason. And there it says, the pasuk says, Lo yabeh lo nashim. The pasuk says you can't take many wives. Amar Shlomo, Ani arbe velo asur, because the pasuk said, don't take many wives. Why? Because your heart might go astray. And Shlomo HaMelech says, oh, no, I can control myself, my Yetzirah, I'm okay. I'm not going to asur, I'm not going to go astray. And then we learned at the end of Malachim that when he became old, he did become astray, he did go astray because of his wives, and there was a mess up over there. The Gemara goes on and it says, don't take many horses in our pasuk and it says why, so you won't go down to Egypt. And Shlomo said, I can do that and I won't go back. And then the pasuk says that he did send people back to Egypt. So Shlomo is going to mess up in the two places, in two halachot where we have the reason for why. Now I do want to take a step pause, a little bit of a disclaimer. Many in Chazal learned that Moshe Rabbeinu, that Shlomo HaMelech did not mess up himself, but it's only the wives that messed up. That's the majority approach to how to learn these pesukim, that it wasn't Shlomo, but the fact that they were sinning with avodah zarah and all the stuff that those wives were doing, and he didn't stop them, so he's considered to be responsible for that. There is a wild Gemara that he's going to get totally exiled, and he's going to be replaced by this evil malach, but he's going to lose his kingship because of this, as we're going to see, at least according to one opinion, temporarily. But Shlomo HaMelech is going to get punished for this. But it seems to be, according to the mainstream approach in Chazal, he didn't necessarily do it directly. I saw in Rav Shalom Cohen, Alav Shalom, he writes that Shlomo HaMelech was so great. We know he was so great. He was the biggest chacham. He was a tzaddik. So we don't want to be, we have to be very careful what we're saying. But he says, "Ma lasot." Chazal did teach us there was a mistake here. So we're going to speak about what Chazal said. But of course, we have to realize that Shlomo HaMelech on his great level. Okay, that's the disclaimer. Okay. So based on this Gemara, there were two mitzvot that we knew the reasons for. And Shlomo HaMelech, knowing those reasons, thought he could be smarter than those reasons. He said, I can take more wives and it won't be a problem. I can go and get horses. I won't go back to Egypt. And ultimately, he's going to mess up in those two cases. Now, if we go to the Midrash tells over a similar idea like our Gemara, but it has a little bit more fun. And you guys know from the previous Divrei Torah that I like little diukim, I like little nuances in letters in the Torah. So there's a fun Midrash. Actually, this Midrash is found in many places. But let's start with the Midrash in Shemot Rabbah. This is in Perek Vav over there, Siman Aleph at the very beginning. This is going on Parashat Vayera. Says the Midrash. The Midrash there is quoting a pasuk that Shlomo HaMelech himself writes in Kohelet. Some of the commentators say he actually wrote this after all the balagan happened with his wives, after he messed up taking up too many. But he writes a pasuk where he says that a person should not question God's ways. Don't try to be smarter than God. Don't try to re-understand things the way you want to. Don't try to be smarter than HaKadosh Baruch Hu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mitzvot. And the Midrash there says that there were two people that kind of made this mistake. One is Moshe Rabbeinu. We'll get back to that at the very end of this Dvar Torah. But the Midrash starts off with Shlomo HaMelech. Okay. How did Shlomo HaMelech? Says the Midrash. Al Shlomo Ketzad. How did Shlomo HaMelech mess up? Where he was questioning God or trying to outsmart what God was saying, so to speak. Says the Midrash. Keshenatan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Torah l'Yisrael. When Hashem gave us the Torah, Natan ba mitzvot aseh, mitzvot lo ta'aseh. He gave us positive commandments and He gave us negative commandments. V'natan lamelech miktzat mitzvot. And He gave some special laws just for the melech, for the king. Shnei Amar in our pasuk, don't take many horses, don't take gold and silver, don't take many wives. Amad Shlomo v'chkim al gzerato shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shlomo HaMelech stood up and he tried to outsmart the gzera of Hashem, and he said, V'amar, lama amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo yaber onashim. Why did God say not to have lo yaber onashim? Lo b'shvish shelo yisuru avo, ani arbe b'libi lo yasor. Isn't it because God even says, because our heart shouldn't go astray, I'll take many wives, and I won't go astray. Says the Midrash, Amru Rabboteinu, the rabbis taught, Be'ota sha'a, at that moment, Alta Yud, the letter Yud from Shebe Yarbeh, from the pasuk of Yarbeh, you can't take many wives. Yarbeh, the Yud, got up and he went up to the Shamayim, Vishtatcha lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and came before Hashem, bowed down before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and said, Ve'amra, Ribon ha'olamim, God, Master of the universe. Lo kach amarta ein od betala min haTorah l'olam. Didn't you say that there's no letter in the Torah that could ever be nullified, could ever be erased? Harei Shlomo omer metenoti. But Shlomo HaMelech is erasing me, is nullifying me. And maybe today he's going to erase one letter, tomorrow more. The whole Torah will be nullified if Shlomo HaMelech gets away with erasing me, the letter Yud of Yarbeh. Amar la Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh Baruch Hu says to the letter Yud, Shlomo ve'elef kayotze bo yu betelim. Let Shlomo and 1,000 like Shlomo be erased and be removed. V'kotza mimech eini mevatel. But I will not nullify, I will not erase even a tiny kotza, even a tiny smidgen of you, and even a tiny little speck of you. No way, I am not erasing the Yud from the Torah. Now, the Maharal on this Midrash adds that we see from here, it's not the sin of taking many wives that's going to lead to Shlomo losing his Malchut, at least for a short period of time in his lifetime, but rather what's making him lose the Malchut? His erasing of the Torah. The Torah is going to fight. You erase the Torah will fight against you, and you will lose your Malchut. So it's not the sin itself, but it's the way of messing with the Torah to get to that sin. That's what put him over the edge to lose the Malchut for that time period. Okay. Then the Midrash explains that this is not the first time this happens to the Yud, because the Yud says to God, you said you wouldn't do this. How does the Yud know that? So we learned earlier, it says the Midrash, Uminayin should be tell Otamina Torah b'chazar Torah. And how do we know that Hashem will not erase it? And if he does erase it, he's going to bring it back. Shine Emar, as the Pasuk says, Sarai ishtecha lo tikra shema Sarai, ki Sarah shema. When Sarai's name, when Avraham was originally Avram and his wife Sarah was originally Sarai, Sarai's name gets changed from Sarai to Sarah. So what happened to that Yud? So when Hashem said, I'm not going to call you Sarai, I'm going to call you Sarah, the Yud disappeared. Where did it go? V'hechan chazar, v'hikra Moshe leHoshea binun Yoshua. When Moshe calls Hoshea binun Yoshua, Moshe returns the Yud to Yoshua, and therefore we're okay. The Maharal, and this says beautifully, we have the Pasuk in Tehillim, Even ma'asu abonim hayta lerosh pina. Even ma'asu abonim, the builders, the original rocks, the original stone comes from the Avot and the Imaot. They're the original. That becomes hayta lerosh pina. That's going to become the Rosh, the head of the corner, meaning he explains that the earlier generations, that's Even Masu Abonim, the earlier generations refer to Avraham, Sarah, Yitzchak, Rivka, all the Avot and Imahot, they are the beginning. They're going to become the Rosh of the Pina. They're going to become the start of the corner, meaning when we get down to the later generations of Yoshua, the beginning of Yoshua is going to take the Yud from Sarah. Okay. The Midrash then goes on, speaks about how Moshe Rabbeinu messed up and what happens over there. We'll get back to that at the very end. Okay, there's a similar Midrash in Shir HaShirim Rabbah. This is in Perek Hey, Siman Yud Aleph over there, says Shir HaShirim Rabbah. Here the Pasuk is quoting quoting a Pasuk from Shir HaShirim that speaks about Shechorot Ka'orev, that it's black as a raven. Okay, symbolically, what does it mean black as a raven? Rabbi Alexandre Bar Hadrin, Rabbi Alexandre Karova Amar, these Rabbi Alexanders, these two Alexanders say, Afilu im mitkanshin kol bae olam al albin kanaf echad min haorev enan yecholin. If the whole world would want to come along and they would want to whiten the wing of a black raven, it can't happen. The wing will always be black. And so too, if the whole world would want to come and erase the letter Yud from the Torah, Einan Yecholin, they can't do that. And where do we learn this from? We learn this from Shlomo HaMelech. And then it says like our Midrash, because he wanted to erase the letter Yud from Yarbeh, and the letter Yud got up and and fought out against them. I actually think the whole concept of the raven and the black and the letter Yud, I think it's hinting to over here the concept of the mystical ideas of the black ink on the white parchment, because the Midrash is going to go on to say that any little change in the Torah can destroy the world. If you change Echad to Acher, Shavai Yisrael Shem Hashem Echad, we have one God. The Echad becomes an Acher, the Dalet to a Resh, a tiny little quotes, a tiny little bit of ink, that little fleck of ink between a Dalet and a Resh makes such a big difference. So too is our case of this letter Yud in Yarbeh, this little tiny letter Yud. It's the smallest of all the letters, but it's such a big deal. And when it comes to complaining, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will listen to it. Okay. Now here in this Midrash, it says when the letters from Sarai was complaining, Hashem answered and said, no, don't worry, I'm going to add you to Yehoshua, because in the past, you were at the end of a name, and now you're at the beginning of the name, you're at the end of Sarai, now you're at the beginning of Yehoshua, you went from a Nekeva to a Zachar as well, and these are all considered to be praises to the letter. And I actually saw in this concept of the Zachar, Nekeva, Yehoshua, and Sarah, that Yehoshua, that Sarah was kind of like the moon to Avraham Avinu, who was the sun. So to Moshe Rabbeinu is the sun, and Yehoshua was compared to be like his moon. So Yehoshua has the certain traits of Sarah Imenu, and that's why the Yud of Sarah is going to go dafka to Yehoshua. We spoke in the past some other ideas of Sarah Imenu's love for Eretz Yisrael, and Yehoshua is going to be able to fight for Eretz Yisrael. So there's a lot of connections between Sarah Imenu and Yehoshua. But I actually also saw an interesting mystical idea, I didn't quite understand it, that says that because of the feminine Sarah and Yehoshua is never going to be zochet to have sons, but only daughters. Okay, I'm not sure what that's Kabbalistic ideas. Now, in one more version of this Midrash in Vayikra Rabbah in Perek Yutet, Siman Bet, over here, it also tells over the whole Sarai thing, but here it gives two opinions. It said our opinion in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, but then it gives a different opinion. Rav Huna b'shem Rav Acha, he says the Yud that Hashem took from Sarai from this became split. It became split from a Yud 10 to two Hays 5 and 5, and that's the Hay that went to Avraham and the Hay that went to Sarah. So according to this version, the Yud was never actually erased; it was just split up into two. Now, at the start of this version of the Midrash, though, is a beautiful extra teaching, a teaching by Amar Rabbi Zeira, which I thought is nice because Zeira also means small. So we're talking about the small little Yud. So this rabbi named Rabbi Zeira, he starts off and he learns, his teaching is Afilu devarim she'ata ro'otan kotzin b'Torah, even things that you see as those little tiny kotzin, as little small things in the Torah, taltalei taltalim hen yocholim lachriv et ha'olam kulo, they could destroy the whole world if you erase them. And the Maharal in his Tiferet Yisrael, it's the section Memtet, he writes over there, Ben Daf Memtet, he writes over there that big stuff, the tiniest things over here could do the biggest deals. If you erase one little bit of the Torah, says the Maharal, we have Churban, we're going to have major destruction, everything's going to become a tell, as the Midrash closes off over there. It's all going to be broken down. So therefore, we have to realize how important is this little Yud. Okay, so let's have a little bit of fun, and let's talk about the Yud. Why is it that the Yud is complaining? There's a whole word over here. It says, Lo yarbeh, do not take many wives. Well, why is it only the letter Yud that's complaining? Okay, so on the simple level, I think what the Midrashim are really saying is because the Yud is so tiny, it's a tiny little bit of ink, and you might think, oh, what's a little Yud? What's a little tiny ink? What's the tiniest letter in the whole Torah? It's not that important. But here we're saying, no, it is so important. Even the smallest letter in the Torah is so important. It's everything, and that's what the Maharal goes to town on. Okay. Another idea I brought down is that the Yud in Yarbeh, that's the grammatical letter that really makes it a requirement. You cannot take in the future. In the future, you cannot take more wives. That's what really makes it a command for all kings, for all generations. So the Yud, grammatically, is the real oomph behind the halacha, and therefore the Yud is the one complaining. Actually, in the Maharil Diskin, he has a whole piece, a little complicated, where he does all this math in the grammar, where he explains that Shlomo HaMelech was confused. He was confused how the Yud would work. He was learning the Yud in a different kind of way, and that's why the Yud is saying he misunderstood me. Okay, you can read the Maharil Diskin over there about complicated grammar. Okay, says the Chida in Petach Einai, this on the Gemara in Sanhedrin on Kaf Aleph Amud Bet. So he says, why dafka the Yud? So he says beautiful idea. So he has beautiful chidushim. The Chida gives a couple of opinions. He said he heard that why would David and Shlomo in the Gemara? There's actually a big Gemara to discuss how could they even be kings? Their lineage was questioned because they came from Ruth, and Ruth was the Moaviyah. She came from the Moabite nation. As a halacha, you can't marry into the Moabite nation. The Gemara talks at length that for a couple of generations, people were fighting over can Moabites join can they join the Jewish people? They can't because the Torah says you can't. But until they came up with the derasha was Ammoni and Moavi, and not Ammonit and Moavit, or Ammonit and Moaviyah. The halacha was, the Torah says you can't have an Ammoni which is in Zachar, which is in masculine, but not Ammonit, not Moavit, not in the feminine. So the drasha of the Ammoni with the Yud, that is Dafka masculine, that Yud is what gave the halacha that, yeah, David and Shlomo, they could be kings, because they don't come from a Moavi, they come from Ruta Moaviyah, they come from Moaviyah, a female. A female could marry in, it's only a Moavi, a masculine that can't marry in, so therefore David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech, they are kosher to be kings, so Shlomo HaMelech could be the king because of the Yud of that drasha. So now how could Shlomo HaMelech erase the letter Yud? He's king today because of that letter Yud. Okay, so that's the first interpretation. The Chidah gives another idea. This idea, actually, we've said many times in the past, that what does the letter Yud hint to? The letter Yud is a hint, we said, to Anava. The humility, that Yud is tiny, it's small. The Yud is the letter from the word Anav in Moshe Rabbeinu that was missing. The Yud was missing. He gives it to Yoshua because Yoshua was the most Anav of all the people after Moshe. So Yud, we spoke about at length, is a symbol to Anava. But what took place over here? Here, Shlomo HaMelech, there's a certain level of haughtiness here to think that I can understand the Torah better, I can look at it differently. This is what the Chidah writes, that there's an issue, a tiny bit of ga'ava here to be able to learn the Torah this way, and that's why the Yud, who symbolizes Anava, comes out fighting. And actually, if we continue reading our Pesukim in our Parashah, it said to write that Mishnah Torah, to learn these sections. Why? So that you'll have Yirat Hashem and you won't have ga'ava. And because if you have ga'ava, that's going to make you lose out over here. So the Yud is coming to fight for the Anava. Chidah says also, he says, that the Yud knows that Hashem will answer him, because the Yud answer her, because the Yud already complained to Hashem in the case of Sarai, and Hashem answered with Yoshua. So the Yud already knows, okay, Hashem is going to answer, and that's why it's Dafka, the Yud, that's coming to fight. Okay, that is the Chidah. The Ben Ish Hai in Ben Yehoyada, he says some fun stuff also. He asks a different question. He says, why are we starting with the Yud? Let's go back one word. The word lo. Don't take many wives. Why are the lamed and the aleph from lo yarbeh? Why are they not fighting? So he explains the lo. The lamed is not fighting because lamed is part of Shlomo HaMelech's name. Shlomo, Shin Lamed. The lamed is part of his name. He's connected to Shlomo. The lamed is not going to fight against Shlomo. He's part of Shlomo's name. He's too close to him. Okay. Then I saw that the aleph won't fight either and won't complain, because the aleph actually is happy, because instead of lo yarbeh, what does Shlomo HaMelech say he's going to do? He's going to arbe. He's going to change the yud from yarbeh to arbeh, that I will add. I'll take many more wives. So the aleph now went from the end of the word lo and to the beginning of yarbeh, and it becomes like li arbeh. Take the yud and the aleph of lo arbeh, switch it to li arbeh. I'm going to take more. So the yud went to the end of the word, or got erased. The aleph goes to the front. So aleph is happy. We saw in the case of the yud, when he went from the end of Sarai to the beginning of Yoshua, he gets happy. So the aleph here is happy. Now I'm part of arbeh. Everything is going to be okay. The aleph is happy. So the first letter to really come up to complain will be the letter yud. But I also saw that that Yud grammatically speaks about the future. So Lo Yarbeh in the future. So Shlomo HaMelech says Sefer Mipninei Harav. Right now you say you have no Yetzirah, then they're not going to make your heart stray. But you don't know if that's for sure for forever. The Yetzirah, he's not going to stop till the day that you die. So right now you can maybe say, now I could arbeh this exact second. Right now you seem to understand where you're Yetzirah. But you can't speak about the future. So that's where the Yud is coming off, saying in the future, who says you could do it? And then finally I saw brought down in the Maharal, the Imre Yoshe as well says that the Yud is one of the letters of Kadosh Baruch Hu's name. The first letter of Kadosh Baruch Hu's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Yud is Far Shem Havaya, and that's why it's coming up to make complaints. It says no, for the sake of the Torah, the Yud from the Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's connected to Hashem Himself. That's going to be the one to complain. Okay, let's go back now to the Midrash. So we said that the Yud complained, but if we went back to the second Midrash, we said in Shira Shirim Rabbah. So there, the Midrash gave a second opinion that it wasn't the Yud to complain, but somebody else complained. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Omer, Sefer Mishnah Torah Allah. The Sefer Mishnah Torah, he's the one that went up. His Mishnah Torah went up. And I said to Hashem, Hashem, Ribono shel olam, you wrote this contract, which the Chazal learned, like a deathbed contract. And we know the halakha is with these contracts that if you erase if you erase part of the contract, then the whole contract is batel. It can't be. So Shlomo HaMelech wants to erase the Yud from the Torah. So the Mishnah Torah is now fighting and saying, Kadosh Baruch Hu, you can't do this. So now the question is, okay, so why is it the Mishnah Torah that's arguing? So now I think this approach in the Midrash is looking at the continuation of our Pasuk, where the Pasuk says, don't take many wives, and then write this Mishnah Torah. So if you learn that the Mishnah Torah is like the Kliyar Kar says, these verses of don't take many wives, that's why this section of the Mishnah Torah that the king is always supposed to carry with him, they're supposed to always repeat to himself, and this is the section now that's going to come in a fight. But then if we go according to the Gra's interpretation, that's referring to the whole Sefer Devarim, so I saw a beautiful, deep idea in the Sefer Anaf Yosef on the Midrash there. It says, Sefer Anaf Yosef. Kashe, Maishna Mishnah Torah, Velo Kol Torah Kula. He says, why is it that the Mishnah Torah is fighting and not the whole Torah is fighting? The Efshar, now the Anaf Yosef is learning like the Gra, the Efshar, Lefi Moshe Rabbeinu Alav Shalom, Amra Mipi Gvura, Lebe'era Torah. The Sefer Devarim is known as the Be'era Torah, where Moshe explains the Torah. It's from Moshe Rabbeinu's perspective. He's explaining it. It's his words. Ela Devarim, these are the words that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke. So, and in Mishnah Torah, there's also, in the Sefer Devarim, there's also some extra mitzvot that we don't find earlier in the Torah. And if our halacha don't take many wives is in Sefer Devarim. And if somebody would see Shlomo HaMelech erasing and nullifying, removing one of these mitzvot from this book, yachshov shedat Shlomo ki Moshe mipi atzmo amro v'lechen lo chash tegzerato. He might think that Shlomo HaMelech was saying to himself that, oh, Moshe made up this halacha himself, and therefore I don't have to listen because it's Moshe Rabbeinu's. Chas v'shalom, you might misinterpret what Shlomo HaMelech was saying and doing, and think that Moshe didn't agree that Devarim is holy from God, and think that Moshe made part of it up. Chas v'shalom. And from here, they're going to come and nullify everything written in this sefer. If it's not in the earlier Sfarim, if it's not in the first 4 books of the Torah, then it's not from Hashem, and therefore we don't have to keep it, chas v'shalom. So therefore, Mishnah Torah, Sefer Devarim, this holy book that Hashem wrote, that's a word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the mouth of Moshe, this is the book that's now coming up to fight against the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What a powerful Anaf Yosef. And the truth is, I'm not sure if in the Anaf Yosef generation he was dealing with that, but in our generation, there are certain academics, and there is certain apikorsio and heretical thoughts that try to question Sefer Devarim. So over here, this Midrash is coming out along, and the Midrash is saying, no, Sefer Devarim is coming up and fighting for its own sake, saying, I'm holy, kadosh, just like the other 5 books of the Torah, and we can't let people misinterpret Shlomo HaMelech in this case. Okay, last idea. Let's go back to the first Midrash that we said, where Hashem said that where Shlomo HaMelech's pasuk in Kohelet, that you shouldn't question God and try to outsmart God and try to question Hashem's ways in the Torah and understanding. We said 2 people messed up with that. One was Shlomo, and the other one was Moshe. And this is now the Midrash has actually found the Parsha Va'era, that Moshe Rabbeinu at the very end of the first Parsha of Shemot, when he saw all the suffering of the Jewish people, they became slaves, now they have to go get the hay to make the bricks. He said, Hashem, how could you do this to them? How could you do this? And now it starts off Va'era Elokim, and the strong name of God of justice, of Elokim, of Din, strict justice, comes to speak to Moshe. So says the Midrash, Ketzad Ne'emar al Moshe, where do we find by Moshe that this pasuk of Kohelet would apply that he tried to question? Lefi shekvar hodia Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe shelo yaniach otam paro v'leilech. Because Hashem had already told Moshe that by the burning bush, he said to him, you're going to go to Paro, and Paro's not going to let you go right away. It's going to be difficult. It's going to take some time. I'm going to harden his heart. Moshe lo shamar davar hazeh. But Moshe didn't accept that. Rather, he came to be outsmart the gzera and litchakem, think better than the gzera of Hashem. He said to Hashem, Hashem, why do you hurt this nation? And as we saw at the end of the parsha right before in Parshat Shemot, that he's fighting with Hashem. How can you do this to them? And how could you make it? I came to Paro to let the nation go. And Paro makes the slavery and the suffering so much harsher. Hashem, how can you do this? Now, Hashem had already told him he was going to do this. So that's what the Midrash says. Why are you trying to outsmart God? God already told you this was going to happen. And this is where the Pasuk of Kohelet would apply to Moshe. Okay. How could you question HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ways? Because Hashem already told him that he's going to harden the heart of Hashem in order to do a justice against Mitzrayim, based because of all the heavy slavery. Hashem has to make a much bigger sound and light show to teach the Jewish people and the world about the punishment that has to happen to the Mitzrayim. Biksha midat adin lifgoa b'Moshe, and that's why the parasha of Va'era starts off with Elokim, because the midah of din wanted lifgoa, he wanted to attack Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's why by the Elohim el Moshe. But now the beautiful ending of the Midrash, with this will close. But since Hashem saw that, why was Moshe Rabbeinu fighting against God? Because he saw the pain and suffering that Sa'ar She Yisrael. That's the reason Shediber Ken. So because of that, Chazav and Hagimo b'midat rahamim. So therefore Hashem was Choser and Choser bo. And he wasn't going to use the midat adin, but instead he's going to reverse to midat rahamim of mercy. Hadu t'chtiv, and that's why the continuation of the pasuk ends off. Vayomer Elab Ani Hashem, and Hashem responded to him Ani Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei. And therefore Hashem does not let Elokim Midat Adin win out, but switches over to Yud Kei Vav Kei. So I thought, what a beautiful thing that even in this case of Moshe Rabbeinu questioning Kadosh Baruch Hu, but Hashem looked at the motives. Why is he questioning? Because Moshe Rabbeinu loves the Jewish people so much, and he can't see us suffering, the pain of suffering against the Jewish people. That's what pushed Moshe Rabbeinu to fight with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And for that, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm not going to stick with the Elokim, I'm not going to stick with Din, and I'm going to come back to Yud Kei Vav Kei, to Midat Rachamim. Shabbat Shalom.